In this world absolutely swimming in information, sometimes the real story isn't just what happened. It's more about why and maybe who is really pulling the strings,
Exactly. And today, we're sort of diving into one of those narratives, one that claims to pull back the curtain on some potentially significant external influence.
Yeah, this deep dive, it's focused on what's being described as a recently published U.S. congressional report, specifically looking at financial flows and political influence.
Right. And our way into this today is through a specific source. It's excerpts from a YouTube video. The title translates roughly to "Left-wing NGOs received hundreds of millions of dollars to overthrow the government in Israel who will pay the price for the division." It's from the C14 channel.
And crucially, this video claims it's presenting findings from this U.S. report.
That's the key thing. Our mission here is really clear. We want to unpack the claims being made in this specific source. Looking at the details it alleges are in the report, the narrative it contrasts that with, and the conclusions the speaker draws.
And we're sticking just to what this source material tells us, right? Just laying out the information presented there for you.
Absolutely. Extracting those key nuggets.
Okay, so let's get into it. The big headline claim from this source is that last Friday, the U.S. Congress put out a 14-page report.
Mm-hmm.
And what really jumps out, according to this source, isn't just that there was funding, but the sheer amount.
Yeah, it's talking about close to $1 billion, nearly $1 billion, allegedly flowing into Israel during the Biden administration.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
$1 billion. That's a number that grabs your attention.
It certainly does. And what's maybe even more striking is the purpose the source attributes to this money. It's not just general funds.
Right. What does the source claim the intention was?
Well, according to the video, the explicit goal was to, influence the political situation there, to shape public opinion, to push Israel in a particular direction, and ultimately the source claims to actually overthrow a government in Israel.
Okay, let's unpack that because, wow, that's a huge allegation. Nearly $1 billion with the aim of toppling a government.
It is. And, what's fascinating here, just looking at the claim itself, is the scale and the specificity of the alleged contention. It really frames the discussion around potential external influences on a country's internal affairs.
So if that's the core financial claim, the source then seems to pivot to how this all played out or how it was perceived to play out, particularly with public protests.
Exactly. It sets up a kind of contrast. On the one hand, how the source says these events were presented publicly.
Which was how?
As an organic protest. The narrative was the people are crying out, the public is enraged, the whole country is in an emergency. It mentions descriptions of thousands upon thousands, even tens of thousands, filling Kaplan Street in Tel Aviv, near the Supreme Court.
Right, the big protest images we saw.
Yeah, representing all segments of the population. That was the public face, according to this source.
But then the source suggests something else was going on underneath, like a different layer.
Precisely. It starts pointing to the costs involved as sort of evidence that maybe it wasn't purely spontaneous.
What kind of costs are we talking about? What does the source highlight?
Things like organized transportation from all over the country, huge stages, big sound systems, massive billboards on the Ayalon Highway, free flags being handed out, T-shirts, all sorts of demonstrations and productions, plus significant advertising spend across all media channels.
Okay, so the argument is that those things cost serious money that suggests, organization rather than just pure grassroots anger.
That's the implication the source makes, yes. It connects these operational costs back to the alleged funding, which leads to the source's big counterclaim that what started as a show was exposed as a production.
A production, that's a strong word.
It is. It describes it as a coordinated campaign that was kept going by, quote, a lot of external money. And importantly, it says this money was channeled through straw
associations. So front organizations to hide the real source of the funds.
That's generally what the term implies, yes. Obscuring the origin. So the claim is suggesting a deliberate hidden structure.
So we have the alleged funding, the contrast between organic protest and funded production. What else does the source bring?
Well, it turns its attention to the media, another key player in all this.
And what's the verdict there, according to the video?
Not favorable. The source claims that the media, as always, betrayed its role in this.
Betrayed its role? How so? By not reporting on the funding, or?
Essentially, yes. By not investigating the money behind the protest. The source actually mentions that the Prime Minister himself apparently raised questions about it.
Oh, really? What did he supposedly say?
The source quotes him as saying something like, I noticed there are huge ads on Ayalon across the country worth millions, I think tens of millions of dollars. Didn't you think to check who's doing this? Where is it coming from? What about the sources of funding?
So the source uses the Prime Minister's own reported words to suggest that these questions were out there, but perhaps weren't being pursued by the media.
That seems to be the point it's making. It suggests that kind of scrutiny was warranted, maybe even requested at a high level, but didn't happen widely.
Okay, so that leads us towards the conclusion of the source's argument then.
Right, and the speaker in the video gets quite forceful here. They state very strongly that now this lie is exploding in all our faces.
Exploding. So the idea is that this alleged report is the thing that finally exposes the production.
That's the narrative presented. And then the speaker makes a point about belief versus money. They say all the money in the world could not influence a very deep ideology.
That's an interesting take. So even with this alleged $1 billion, the claim is that underlying beliefs are stronger.
That's the conviction expressed. It raises that question, about the real power of deeply held beliefs compared to external financial pressure. The source definitely comes down on the side of ideology being more powerful in the end.
Does it elaborate on that?
Well, there's an interesting bit where the speaker kind of flips a political label. They talk about how right-wingers were called a herd. And the speaker then asks, who here is really the herd? Sort of implying that those swayed by the alleged production were the ones following blindly.
Ah, okay. Turning the tables on that term.
Yeah. And it all builds to this final assertion of confidence. Even with all the money in the world, they couldn't cover up a simple fact. Truth is stronger than anything, and truth will win.
A very definitive statement on the power of truth as they see it.
Definitely. And the source wraps up by posing a pretty pointed question directly to the audience.
Which is?
Who will pay the price for the division, the incitement, and the refusal to serve that was here?
So placing blame, or at least demanding accountability for the societal fractures that occurred during that period.
Exactly. For the speaker, that question seems to encapsulate the real cost of everything described in the video, tying it back to the alleged funded campaign.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap what we've unpacked from this specific source today.
We heard its central claim about a U.S. congressional report detailing a massive financial flow, nearly $1 billion.
With the alleged purpose of influencing Israeli politics, even overthrowing the government.
Right. And then the source contrasted the public image of protests as organic with its counterclaim of a coordinated, externally funded production.
We also touched on the criticism of the media's role and the source's final conclusions about ideology, truth, and accountability.
And, looking at this source is relevant because it really highlights the complexity of information we often face, how narratives get constructed, the potential, or at least the alleged potential, for hidden influences in major public events. It's one perspective, but it pushes you to think about those hidden layers.
Absolutely. And it leaves us and you with a pretty important thought to chew on, doesn't it? When you encounter these really starkly contrasting narratives, one side saying spontaneous popular uprising, the other saying externally funded operation. How do you, as someone trying to stay informed, actually navigate that? How do you sift through the claims and try to understand what might really be going on behind the scenes?
What tools do you even use to evaluate claims like the ones made in this source video we discussed today? It's a challenge we all face.